Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Sureshni Ryder, and you are here with us today at Boston Media Broadcast, and this is the show called All Accounted For. Basically, if we look at life, it's all about whether you want to balance those books and you want to learn how to balance life as an accounting student, then this is the place for you. I'm never alone. I'm co-hosting with an amazing lady from the Faculty of Accounting. Please welcome B in the house. Hi, B.
Hi.
B, I must tell you, so I did accounting in high school, but like just the very basic accounting, and then I never did actual accounting. But then I realized in real life and in the real world, accounting has played such a pivotal role throughout. Whether I'm at a restaurant, now I'm trying to balance this, who paid what? Here I bought a cup of tea and then there's now 5,000 on the bill. But in different aspects, whether it's math or accounting, it all plays a role, but also just to understanding economics, understanding how everything plays a role in society and how we are part of that. And then obviously when I started getting taxed for the work, and then I was looking at the line items like, how come I'm being charged this and what does it mean? This is why accounting has become so pivotal and important. When we do these courses and when we do All Accounted For, what we do is we break it up for you in these 3 segments. The first segment is called Bottom Line Bulletin. It's where we cover the latest news in accounting. Then we do Credit Where It's Due, and it's something that I really enjoy because it's an opportunity to reflect and meet a chartered accountant who has done something amazing in the industry, something where we can touch base and see how that person's career has pivoted or new developments in that person's life to take inspiration and to aspire to many things that that person has done. So that is what Credit Where It's Due is. And then of course we do Ledger Lowdown, and this is a corporate segment where we actually evaluate an industry and then we unpack how that industry works. So it also is always relatable to the pillars of accounting that you're currently standing. So that's what we're doing right now. This is our basic intro. We want you to lock in. Welcome to All Accounted For. So be in Bottom Line Bulletin, it's where we look at something that's happened, it's pretty major, and then we basically try to talk our way through it and understand it further and how it's developed and what it means for us. In a major development, and this was a pretty big story as well, it was South African Breweries, SAB, which of course was owned by AB InBev. They agreed to pay a whopping 4.5 billion rand to the South African Revenue Services, which is SARS, to settle this long-standing dispute. The disagreement, it stemmed from the 2017 sale of SAB's stake in Coca-Cola Beverages Africa. Initially, SARS demanded 17.7 billion. B, how did this go down and what exactly happened?
After negotiations, that 17 did eventually go down to the 4.5 that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
But essentially what happened was that back in 2017, SAB had a stake in Coca-Cola Beverages Africa, about a 55% stake, and they then sold that to the Coca-Cola for about 3.1 billion US dollars. And as with anything that's money related, SARS said, I want a piece of the pie, and that is what triggered the investigation. But then after negotiations, it then did go down. And interestingly for them, as of June this year, they've already paid about 3.5 billion of that. So they're doing really, really well.
They have a good plan because I was looking at if it's 4.5 billion for SAB to have produced that strong growth on the market and to return that and also pay up 3.1 billion, then things are looking good for them if I think about it post-pandemic.
Absolutely. So they've gone from strength to strength after that, and they actually employ a lot of people. About 140,000 South Africans work within their businesses, or rather within the entire businesses, not necessarily all South Africans, but they are planning and also creating an additional 10,000 jobs in the near future. So they are a very big player in the economy, and we are grateful for the work that they do.
I mean, I love reading that AB InBev really reaffirmed the commitment to the SA economy and like a 920 million rand investment. That is pretty chunky. That's good. That's awesome. Yeah. Oh, I love that. So that was, of course, our bottom line bulletin, something for us to be aware of in the industry. If you want to follow up in that story, it was all about South African breweries versus AB InBev. Now we're doing Credit Where It's Due, and this is where we highlight somebody in industry, a chartered accountant who is really pivoted in the industry, and we're just highlighting all of the amazing things he or she has done. Today is no different. We're looking at and we're profiling Thabo Mongatane, who is the CEO of Kolano Investment Solutions Group. If I read Thabo's biography. It reads like the most beautiful menu at a five-star restaurant. It is phenomenal if you look at the work that Thabo has actually done. And I think this is what people need to know. It isn't just you're a startup, you get started and everything falls into place. It takes years of layering and that hard work. I mean, he is a dedicated entrepreneur. He's a family man. He's also an advocate for Black excellence and purposeful living. Oh, I love when you align with your passion and your purpose, you are on the right track. As the CEO of Kolano Investment Solutions Group, he specializes in consulting, advisory, and then, of course, SMME development and talent management. Mongatane is also the founder of Kumbaya Africa, which is a startup incubator that supports NGOs and social entrepreneurs across sub-Saharan Africa. His commitment to youth development. Now, this is really important because there has to be a succession plan. His commitment to youth development and leadership, it's earned him international recognition, including being selected to be part of the Nelson Mandela Washington Fellowship in 2019. And through this program, he enhanced his civic engagement and leadership skills at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and served as a research fellow at LDI Africa in Washington, D.C. I mean, this is like it's quite a huge feat, especially. Yes, it is. But I'm so proud to read it because it's somebody who's put in the work, and this is what he's done. He's leveraged on all of this amazing knowledge, and he's given back. Mongatane also played key roles in the public sector, and this is where it becomes really important for accounting students to know, including chairing the SA State Theatre's Audit and Risk Committee. He's contributed to SAICA and InterSci initiatives. He is passionate about his role of chartered accountants in driving positive change and believes that more CAs in SA need to professionalize the public sector and support small, medium, micro enterprises and nonprofits. I love this because these are the young pillars in our industry. These are the captains we have to look up to, because it isn't just about, I'm a chartered accountant, this is what I do, but when you see the impact it could have further than a piece of paper, the fact that he's going into community, he's developing things. If you look at Thabo's journey, what do you think the key takeaways are to what he's achieved, like in terms of his purpose-driven leadership, etc.?
So I think it's so amazing to know personally someone like Thabo. I've worked with him, and he's really is about like Black excellence. You need to be amazing. You have to work twice as hard. And I really, really think it's important for people like that to just show you kind of what's possible and show you that you can be an even better version of yourself. And I'm sure all of the brown girls and boys are excited to hear about.
And it does
like
matter.
Thabo. Yeah.
When we discuss it, we talk about representation. It does matter, because when you are sitting in a boardroom and you see people that look like you and speak the same language as you, the way it changes things in your spirit, I can't explain it to you because I see it every single day. So this is very important.
Absolutely. And I think I also love the fact that he's very committed to supporting SMMEs. I think you did speak about the incubator that he has, amongst other accomplishments, and just the work that he's done with SMMEs, and also like coaching younger professionals and that sort of thing. I think that is extremely amazing. So I think, Thabo is just, what will happen if you really do follow your purpose and you follow your goals and your passions, and everything will just radiate. Everything you touch will essentially become gold.
Yeah, I love that he is living a very purposeful life. And I think for me, as somebody I got to work with the SMME sector in the events industry years ago in KZN, and to see the development of small, medium, micro enterprises, even that's being heralded by women, and to see that success, it's so important to have that plan. And I think what I like the most about Thabo's profile and his story, that he's not a gatekeeper when it comes to his information and his knowledge. I mean, you study at the Washington University, you go and do this particular course, and you come back, and it's not just for his own personal empowerment. He's got a global vision, and he's trying to help chartered accountants along the way to say, this is how we give back, this is how we can do better and be better. So good for him. That was an amazing profile to look at, and that of course was credit where it's due. So we're doing ledger lowdown. This is of course one of the sub-segments in this particular topic, and we're looking at the airline industry. You might remember previously that we looked at the banking industry. We looked at a few aspects about how banking works and how money is made, and then of course how it links to your studies in those important pillars, which of course is accounting, taxation, audit and ethics, and then management, accounting, finance, and strat. So we look at this industry and then we see how it relates to what you're actually going through. So if we look at the the airline industry, I think I love the banking industry a lot. And then
I see that.
and then I started thinking about the airline industry and how they make money, because I think when we book a flight, something as simple as getting a flight and we look at the line items of I'm looking for this particular seat. Now I'm paying for the seat. Then I'm paying for this and I'm paying for that. What am I actually getting? And I think once you become a frequent flyer, or once you start using the airline or visiting the airport, you start to wonder where all this money goes. Because when you book a flight and you go, oh, it's only 200 Rand for a flight from here to PE on a special. And then suddenly
Yeah.
when the sheet comes back, it's like, oh, by the way, we charged you this, this, and this. And then it's
This
not,
and this
then
and
you didn't
this.
actually win that
And the oxygen.
And correct, I'm literally paying. Oh, am I paying everybody to do this for me? Or yeah. So when you start to calculate, then it makes sense. And this is why we want to unpack this for you. Okay. If I look at the facts and figures of the airline industry, this I thought was very interesting, and how COVID impacted business, because I think it's something, it's going to become a model that we all look at. It's going to be our crutch point in future, like pre-COVID and post-COVID, and how we make that recovery. But in 2023, the South African domestic airline market, I can't believe this, it carried approximately 19 million passengers, which was a recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic downturn, but still below pre-pandemic levels, which were around 24 million passengers annually. And the main international airports in SA, of course, being OR Tambo International Airport, and then Cape Town International Airport, and King Shaka, which is my hometown, and OR Tambo is the busiest, okay? It handled over 21 million passengers annually pre-pandemic. OR Tambo International serves as a major hub for Southern Africa, connecting regional flights with international long-haul services. B, if you had to look at this particular sector, how do you think the aviation sector has done?
So they're a very big sector. The airline industry contributes about 3.5% of the GDP, which is amazing. So they also employ quite a lot of people. And the players in the space would be your SAAs, your ComAs, which doesn't exist anymore, your Kululas, FlySFA, Lyft, all of those guys, Airlink. So those are the players that we're talking about in this industry.
And they do contribute significantly to our tourism industry. But in the preamble, I did say, what was important when we're looking at the airline industry, similarly to how we look at the banking industry, we create these line items to figure out how then is money made, because airlines make money through various revenue streams. You've got your ticket sales, ancillary services, the cargo transport, as well as partnerships. I mean, if you think about something as simple as I need to get my dog from Cape Town to Johannesburg, you can't just there's a cost for everything. So could you give me some of those like line items of how money is made in this particular industry?
So I think the obvious one would be where tickets are sold. So they make money through ticket sales. And they also then have your ancillary services such as baggage fees. So they would charge you a fee for checking in an extra bag, or a bag if it's a low-cost airline. They also will sell food or some other things in the flights. They also make money via cargo transportation. So that's where they would transport things that are very time sensitive. So if you think about flowers or fruits, for example, you can't necessarily use a ship to move that kind of cargo. Air kind of travel would be more appropriate. So that's also how they make money. And then they also have like partnerships with other airlines where, for example, if you're then flying from, let's say, Turkish Airlines from Istanbul to Hoedspruit in South Africa, when you then get to Johannesburg, there's no Turkish Airlines going to Hoedspruit. So now that partnership between Airlink or SAM-Air, then they would then make money via those customers that are then connecting on those routes. And then you also get your SAAs that get bailouts. It's not necessarily a revenue stream as such, but it's it's how they stay afloat. So I think this would have been in the news a couple of times where SAA really struggles and then the government steps in to help them. But I think just summary-wise, that is what we're looking at.
Okay, so when we look at how money is made, I mean, down to your seat selection, now you can think about it
Yes.
more cognitively and consciously. Now you know,
Yes.
oh, so if
You're
I
making
decided to
money for
be, you know, if I want to be in 4A and get to the line ahead, I'm actually paying that extra cash. Even when you want to do priority
yes.
boarding, if you think about it, you pay that
Yes.
extra so that you can get called first and you end up the plane like everybody else. So
Absolutely.
things to take into consideration. And if we look at to like summarize, the airlines in South Africa, they generate revenue through this combination of ticket sales, ancillary services, cargo, etc. This is the way B has explained. That was us looking at this particular section. On to the next, we're talking about how it links to your studies. We are now looking at one of the important pillars of how everything that you're learning and talking about links to studies. B, let me ask you this. In terms of IFRS, is there anything specific that relates to the airline industry that we should be aware of?
So if we just look at the different income streams that we're talking about, so for example, with your ticket sales, when SAA or any of those airlines then sell a ticket, they don't immediately recognize that revenue. They would then wait for to offer the flight first, only for them to then recognize the revenue, right? And if you then think about where they sell a seat or baggage, they would then also not recognize it when you pay, when you book, but only once that service has been provided. And then if you also think about loyalty programs, right? So when you buy a ticket and then they say you earn points and blah, 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 nothing is free, just by the way. So that blah, blah, blah that you're getting is actually part of the cost that you paid. So they now need to allocate a portion of that money that you did pay over to them to say this is the actual cost of the flight and this is the value of the loyalty points. So they then recognize that as a deferred kind of revenue or as a liability to then provide a flight to you in the future. So that would be your IFRS 15 considerations. And then if you also think about IFRS 16, leases. So some airlines, actually a lot of airlines don't really own the planes that they use, but they rent them. So they then need to account for that in accordance with IFRS 15, recognizing that right of use and then depreciating it over time, as well as charging the interest on that lease liability as well. And then you also have IFRS 9, your financial instruments. So this is now where airlines would then hedge, for example, the price of fuel. So because the price of fuel is so volatile, they would then say, you know, we if it's going to go above a certain point, we want to be protected, or currency fluctuations or such things. So that's where your IFRS 9 would then come in if the airline has something like that. And then you also have another very important one, IFRS 13, fair value measurement. So this is important because if you look at a standard like IAS 36, which deals with impairment, they speak about, for example, needing to find a fair value of the thing that is possibly impaired. But the question is, what is the fair value of an engine? It's not something that you can just go and take a lot and check how much does an engine cost or things like that.
Or like
So
a
their parts
part.
are so
Yeah.
specialized. Yes, they're so specialized that, you know, how do you then determine the fair value of something like that? So that would be an appropriate standard for airlines to look at. And I think another interesting one would be IFRS 8. That's operating segments, to then say you want the investor to have the best information possible. So you want them to know, for example, which business or which segment within the business makes the most profit, right? And so that means that they would then need to account for the different businesses separately so that you can see, oh, how much profit is cargo business making? How much profit is the domestic side of our business making versus the international or such things? And then you also have IAS 37, your provisions. So that's when you say, at some point, our planes are going to require maintenance. We just don't know when it's going to happen, but we definitely know it's going to happen. So you'd recognize a provision for something like that. So it's not an exhaustive list of standards, but it's just some of the things that would play really well into the airline space.
Yeah, I know it's a snapshot, but my word, I didn't think about the airport part or the airline parts. If you think about upgrades and turbines and things like that, I didn't think about those kind of things. And
Absolutely.
this is
Absolutely. So
awesome.
accounting can be interesting.
It is. It fully is. Now I'm rethinking, why didn't I choose accounting? I'm like, you've got amazing. Like, I love the contract section that really interests me, and I think, like I said, students, once you start to understand for example, we're looking at airlines, and you need to book a flight to Durban, and there you off to Cape Town, and you see this little special that someone's running for $50, and you enter the contest, you enter, and you finally hold on. It's actually not $50 because I still have to pay for my seat, and then to get my one
To
bag,
check my
and
bag, to
then
buy
to
my
check my
water.
bag, then to get the oxygen. You're paying for premium oxygen, friends. So once you get to that, you then start to go, whoa, what have you been having me the whole time? So I think these things really make you you're more alert. You just become more alert, and you can read the room better. So this is what we like to unpack in all accounting for. Up next, one of the next pillars in accounting, of course, is taxation. B, what are the considerations when it comes to value added tax, which is VAT, something we're very familiar with? I remember my parents owning a small business, all I would hear about, we have to pay this amount of VAT. VAT scared me. And then income tax, which is also important. Can you just talk me through all of that?
So I think, let me just start with the VAT. Interestingly, that for domestic and international flights, the VAT percentage is different, right? So for your domestic flights, you're going to get charged VAT at the full 15%. But if it's an international flight, it's zero rated. So that means that VAT is charged at 0%. So that would be, I suppose, the way that VAT works there is the same as it would for any other business, just as it does, for example, for income tax. It's the same rate, the 27% that we spoke about for banking as well. And I think maybe just one thing just to highlight here is with regard to capital allowances. So you get your very big or industry specific assets that we spoke about, the wind turbines. Sorry, the is it called a wind turbine?
Yeah, it's a
The
turbine.
thingy that does the thing. Yeah. So we speak about like those types of assets that are there for airlines. And then SARS then says, look, because it's also such a specialized area, you can get like your own kind of section in the Income Tax Act where you can claim depreciation for those types of assets. So that would be Section 12F in the Income Tax Act that specifically deals with aviation related assets, and then also 12C for all of your other stuff. So yeah, I think those are the important ones that I'm thinking about now.
Now we're going into auditing and ethics. And I think, like I said, as a consumer, this excites me because I just need to know what's happened. I want to see the transparency. I want to understand where the money has gone, if it's been lost, and how a business has performed and the impact it's having in the industry, if it's in a good place or not. In auditing and ethics, because we're looking at the airline industry, previously we looked at the banking industry, now we're focusing on airlines. In the most recent financial year, South African Airlines received various audit opinions reflecting the industry's ongoing challenges and financial instability. And I think these were the hot topics. Everybody knew about SAA and, of course, ComAir. You actually preempted the conversation about ComAir. B, let's look at what happened in terms of the scoring or how they performed in these audits. Let's start off first with South African Airways.
So I think something interesting about South African Airways is that obviously because they have so many bailouts, the question is whether or not they're sustainable on their own. So an auditor would then come in and look at things like, is this entity a going concern? Would they be able to function in the foreseeable future? And because of this, the SAA then received a qualified audit opinion, right, where they say we're unsure about whether or not these people are going to continue to exist in the future. But also, I think another thing is, remember we're talking about the different revenue streams. They also got a qualification on that to say that they were not doing things properly, right? So for all of the revenue that they made, they did not record all of it. So that was one of the qualifications that SAA had. And then if we think of ComAir, they had an adverse audit opinion because they were already struggling even before COVID. When COVID came, it just made things worse for them. So they had very high debt levels, their profitability wasn't great, and they then had an adverse audit opinion because they were essentially saying, we don't think these guys are also going to be able to continue as a going concern. So those are very, I think this shows just how important auditors are just in industry in general, not specifically here, but they're able to tell us certain things about the companies that we want to invest in or may want to invest in.
And these are key issues.
They also have,
these are key issues. If they're not pointed out initially, like when you're saying they're not paying for something or they're keeping things under wraps, we need to know that. That's why that level of transparency is so important in the auditing process. And I think other than auditing in this topic, we're also talking the ethical part of it. That's pretty important, safety and maintenance and the compliance. Because if they're not, explaining like, oh, we did this and we did this, we bought this part from here, that could affect our safety in the long term. And we need to know that.
So, I mean, if you think about it, like aviation, it's not a place where you want to cut costs in such a way that you now compromise on
Correct.
quality, right? Because then you're going to get accidents, you're going to get people's lives that are going to get lost. If you think about the Boeing,
Yes.
I think
Yeah. With the
737s
doors
that have been
mid-flight.
crashing,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's like,
Doors
what happened?
disappearing.
What's going on?
Yeah.
Like,
Yes, you can't be using
so
cheap
all of
parts.
those things are
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. And then,
Exactly. People's lives are at stake.
yeah, when we spoke about the green banking in the previous segment, I really like that because that led to this lovely segue into what about the ethics? And when you talk about auditing and ethics, the environmental impact, we talk about carbon footprints all the time, but let's talk about the environmental impact in the airline industry as part of the ethics.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely one of the biggest polluters of the environment. And so I think the expectation with the community or from people at large is that what kind of eco-friendly technologies are they investing in? Are they thinking about sustainability? And more importantly, are they also transparent about the extent to which they're damaging the environment? So those are things that airlines would need to look at. And if they do that well, then we could say they are practicing ethical business.
Got it. And if you were to summarize this particular section, how would you from auditing and ethics in the airline industry?
I mean, I'd say audit is important, and because it tells the users of the financials to what extent they need to rely on the information that's been presented, right? And it's also important for you to then see kind of the end result as well. As a consumer, like you were saying earlier, you buy a ticket, but you don't really know where it goes. But now these numbers are shown to you, and the question is, can you rely on them? You need someone to kind of vouch for those numbers. And then ethics is just an inescapable thing that we have to deal with, airline industry or not. I think at South Africa, we need to be looking heavily into ethics because we do have an ethical problem of sorts. So if you now sensitize even the students, exactly, if you now sensitize even the students to, this is what ethics looks like in the real world as well. These are decisions that you're going to have to make one day when you sit in corporate and you have to make these big decisions. It's just, it should be ingrained in you. It should be a huge part of your personality.
Yeah. And I think just an overview, if you look at auditing and ethics, you should look at it as like your annual checkup. That's what you guys are doing. You're doing an annual checkup on a business. You're making sure that all the parts are operating. And if it's not, this is where you need to improve. This is what we need to get done. And then you're also saying, hey, I see you have not been taking your oxygen. I see you have not been drinking enough water. I see you haven't been doing this, this, and this. You've got to take care of yourself and take care of the people around you. And that's literally what this whole auditing and ethics part of it is all about. Get that annual checkup. At the very beginning of today's module, we discussed the different ways we're breaking down the course. Like I said, we looked at different things in the airline industry and how it impacts you. We look at the bottom line bulletin, credit where it's due, and of course the ledger lowdown. And then we try to relate it to the different pillars of what you're studying in accounting. One of the last pillars that we're looking at today, which is a very important one, it's a bit chunky, it's the management accounting, finance, and strategy. You've got to have a plan. Now, in the airline industry, several key concepts, they intersect with management accounting, strategy, and of course, finance. These concepts help airlines manage their costs, optimize their revenue, and make strategic decisions to remain competitive in a complex and volatile environment. I think if you read news and you're familiar with how SAA have tried to bounce back, that has been all part of a strategic move. Like look at what's going wrong, try and do the diagnosis, and then of course trying to move forward. Like, okay, this is the plan. This is how we like to bounce back. This is how we will relaunch and repivot. B, can we go through some of these concepts? For example, cost management control and the pricing, like strategy. How does it work in the airline industry?
So I think the students would already be familiar with concepts such as fixed versus variable costs. So fixed cost in this instance would be, for example, the lease premium that an airline would need to pay monthly. So it's fixed. Salaries are also fixed. And then variable costs would be something like, say, catering, something like fuel. So the fuel will be different depending on the weight or the number of people on the flight. And then there's also another concept called activity-based costing, where overheads are essentially allocated per activity to then show a much more clearer view of which kind of segments or which activities are profitable, right? So again, I think I made an example earlier of like domestic versus international versus cargo and that sort of thing. And then I think another thing that I just want to highlight is the fact that you and the person that's sitting next to you will almost never pay the same amount
That shocks me.
for a flight.
Yeah, that's right. Because I may have chose the preferred seat. I may have taken on 2 bags.
You may have booked earlier. I
yes.
may have booked later. So all of those things. So
Wow.
airlines now need to sit down and decide on their pricing strategies. So they use data analytics to give them information on how to basically optimize their pricing. So that would be a concept that students would have learned in their textbooks. I think another one while we're talking about this is route profitability analysis. So where you essentially decide which routes are worth keeping, which ones are worth dumping, and what else should we explore. So if you think about Palabora, for example, that's where I'm based. We used to have an airport once upon a time, but I think we only had like 1 flight a week or something like that. And then eventually, eventually the airlines were just like, you know what, this route is not profitable. So now if I want to fly, I now have to go either to Polokwane or Hoedspruit, because that's where I can catch a flight. So all of those decisions are decisions that airlines need to make. They're constantly sitting and saying, you know, is this route profitable? Or is there another route that we can potentially get into? So that's a concept that students would be aware of.
I know that Dubai, I know that Dubai is not having the same problem. Dubai is not having the same problem in terms of routes. That has become the hottest hub.
Exactly. Dubai is not Palabora.
Yeah, not Palabora. Shame. We'll think about you the next time, B. We'll try figure out a more profitable route to get to collect you, man. But that's interesting as part of strategy. It's something I didn't think about.
Yep. And when you were talking earlier about SAA, so for example, they would then need to think about how to turn around their business.
Yes.
And I think we were saying off air that there was an airline that decided that in order to save money, they needed to remove olives from their sandwiches.
That's right. That was their strategy, because we were discussing food. You know, like food is an important thing. You're taking a 2-hour flight to Cape Town, okay? A dry sandwich is not going to do it, my friend. Like, you got to add some pesto. You got to make that mozzarella not be so dry. You're putting a piece of something. Give me something. But now you're taking away olives.
Give me a full can of Coke.
Give me a full. Yes. And then what they were trying to do is, because they realized after doing their diagnosis that we don't have enough money. But if we take away something that felt premium, which is like olives, something simple as olives, you take it out, and then the cost started to go down. And then this is why we're being offered these dry sandwiches. But I don't, you know, when you think about the bigger picture, like this is how they start to save money. Magazines, you know, often you'd get into the plane and there's an in-flight magazine that's quite expensive and done beautifully. And slowly these things are becoming thinner. And because we're in the digital age, people are not into it. So in-flight entertainment used to be a thing, and now it's decreasing. So you can actually see where people have taken ways to like cut down things. You know, you can see when you get into the flight the next time. Look around you. Just look around you and start listening. Don't just listen to like, these are the exits here and here. Listen, part of strategy, they also did the same thing. Yeah, pay attention, because they're also doing like, the lights are lighting up for them. But yeah, it's amazing to think about how that plays a role when it comes to the management of the airline industry and the great impact that it's actually having.
Absolutely. I think you've summed it up really well.
Awesome, V. Thank you so much. I loved looking at the airline industry. I think I really understand it better. And like we said, this is it's not an exhaustive list. I think this is something that you will unpack further. These concepts are quite big. And we've been saying from the very beginning of the show, it's not about eating the elephant in one day. We take it in small spaces and small pieces. And I think when you sit in your accounting class the next time, these are the things that are going to pop up into your head and the questions that you're going to start thinking about. Fantastic session once again with you, B. Looking forward to catching up with you on the next edition of All Accounted For, proudly brought to you by Boston Media Broadcasts.